Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Farhan Quresh, and the topic is obviously spirituality, which I think all of us can pursue regardless of what our belief systems or approach to life is. And the other, esotericism, something that we should all be skeptical of. And the reason why I put both of these in the same discussion is because the two are often mixed in with one another and confused with one another as being somewhat of the same thing. And we'll talk about and define these two concepts momentarily. But what I want to do first is give you a little bit background of myself and why this topic is of importance to me, and I think to a large amount of people that are living and have lived throughout human civilizations. I stand before you an agnostic, someone who claims to not know what the ultimate reality behind existence is. I don't pretend to know what happens to us when we die. But this, being able to come to this position was a long struggle. It really was. Because being born and raised in a Pakistani American home, I was severely indoctrinated. Indoctrinated with rituals, with beliefs, with dogma, with obviously from an Islamic background. And the severity of the brainwashing and the indoctrination that went on there really and truly had me perceive the world a certain way. And it took time and effort to be able to come to the point of agnosticism and admit that these are questions that are simply unknown and cannot be known. And so, being involved in religion for so long, I came to the point where when I gave up on it, and the reasons why I gave up on it was because of my education in psychology, as well as my experiences with diversity and plurality in the human species. But when I came to that point, the questions of life still boggled the mind to me. And so I thought that in the midst of skepticism, atheism, agnosticism, in the midst of deciphering what we know, what the facts are, and where the evidence leads us, can a skeptic who is so dedicated to facts still be spiritual? And what is spirituality? When we begin to put aside the superstition and theological dogma that comes with religion, and we focus on the experience of life, where does that take us? When we put aside the conjecture, the concepts, the informations our minds attempt to do mental gymnastics with to make sense of reality as we do with philosophy, when we put that aside and instead we focus on the experience of reality and existence, where does that take us? When we put aside the mechanics that biology, chemistry, and physics verifies and falsifies, and we focus on the experience that is the product of these natural mechanisms, where do we arrive? We arrive, I believe, at spirituality. Spirituality does not require faith or belief. It's not about what's true or untrue, what is known or unknown. It doesn't require us to think about the concepts or experiment with the mechanics of what's going on. It simply requires us to focus our attention and our awareness on the subjective experiences we each are having. Now, of course, we absolutely advocate science and philosophy as pivotal approaches to understanding reality. The fulfillment that science and philosophy gives us, though, should supplement the experience of life and not distract us from it. And that's the big problem. There are way too many distractions. Literally everything in our lives is distracting us from the real thing. It becomes a situation where spirituality is in fact lost or significantly minimized. Distractions like work and school, health and family, relationships and bills, stress, guilt, trauma, self-esteem, the past, the future. These are some of the more direct distractions a person faces. Another type of distraction involves individuals who become obsessed with conceptualizing reality in the processes of their mind, or they tend to focus on how everything is the way that it is, i.e. the scientific methodology. And due to these obsessions, they often distract themselves from the real thing, life itself. We are so conditioned, so used to the contemporary human experience that we take for granted what experiencing reality, despite all of its complexities, really is, or really means, should I say. There are individuals to whom the experience of life is only a chemistry in the brain, where love is just a neurotransmitter, where morality is just a social construct and we are machines or programs conditioned by nature and nurture, where we are nothing more than biological organisms responding to internal and external stimuli. And while all of this is true, for some reason, the taste of delicious food, the awe of experiencing human crowds cheering simultaneously, the sight of the sun at dawn, the ecstasy behind intimacy, the tears behind suffering, how all of these sensations are absolutely full of meaning to us, where life is something more than just a result of cosmogenesis or abiogenesis. And what do we mean by more? What do we mean that life is more than? I would say that life is more than just mechanisms that we can study or look at. It's experiential. It's full of wonder, full of mystery, full of awe, full of beauty, full of quality, and it's absolutely inspiring. And when we come to the awareness or consciousness that the experience of laughter, the experience of each other, the experience of art and dance and music, that all of this is something that the scientific method cannot fully appreciate, that words, symbols, languages, and philosophy cannot fully do justice to what is happening. We're at the moment of experiencing, all questioning stops. That is spirituality. Now, the second part that I wanted to talk about has to do with esotericism, and this is where skepticism should fully come into play. Esotericism is a Greek term that connotates an inward realization where only a select amount of individuals who arrive at this realization about reality. And this is where this is a little bit of the tricky part. Because, for example, Christians will say that they have come to realize they are sinners and need a Savior, and anyone who does not realize this is walking in blindness. Or Muslims might say that they realize they have revelation from God, and that those who do not realize this are walking in misguidance. Buddhists might say that they've reached nirvana or enlightenment, and unless you spend your entire life meditating in a monastery, that you cannot reach enlightenment. Atheists might say that they realize that there isn't a God, and everyone else who does not realize this is walking in foolishness. And so on. And generally with esotericism, people claim to have some type of gnosis or knowledge that others do not. Now, if you do a search on spirituality on either Google or YouTube, you're going to find a ton of information coming from ancient esoteric and mystical traditions. These traditions range from numerous religious ideas from Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism, Gnosticism, New Age thought, and more specific superstitions such as the law of attraction, astrology, and so on. And this is where people become confused about spirituality. People are looking at ways and methods to become more aware, so they go and read books and websites that are absolutely good in many of their teachings. You know, they teach introspection, reflection, contemplation, meditation, and so on. But then they throw in their ideas that we can and should be skeptical of, like karma and prayer, law of attraction, chakra, energy circles, and so on. And while these can be fascinating in terms of imagination, they don't have any evidence for them. And that's the unfortunate part about these sources, is that they're really mixing superstition with spirituality, and that skeptics, when they read this, they become discouraged and as a result abandon any pursuit of spirituality at all. Perhaps if I were to guide someone to a more scientific approach to spirituality, I'd refer them to psychology and psychotherapy. Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and other psychologists describe very strategically the process of self-actualization, a process of coming to know oneself, to realize one's fullest potential in any given category or pursuit. Abraham Maslow, in his book Theory of Human Motivation, says self-actualization is a yearning for self-fulfillment. And so on Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, just above self-esteem, on top of the pyramid is self-actualization. With self-esteem comes accomplishments or achievements, confidence and respect. And with self-actualization comes creativity, morality, lack of prejudice, acceptance of facts, and so on. And I guess this is more of a modern way of looking at Buddha's Eightfold Path, where we see reality as it is. And so I've dedicated myself to being a student of psychology and working in mental health for the past 4 years, trying to help people who are suffering from everyday life to come to realize and to become aware of the moment that they have now. And that's just kind of, I guess that kind of wraps up my presentation. I want to open up for questions in terms of spirituality and being able to decipher it from more so the superstition and religious dogma side of it.
Do you think instead of, the thing, it's more of a comment, it's just that I have a problem saying spirituality because there's so much thing that you're describing about love, like before you even know what chemicals were involved in love, or what chemicals are involved in everyday social interactions. So what I'm saying is that I think that one day we will be able to not pinpoint exactly what love is, but how it works. So do you think that instead of spirituality, it's possible that you're talking about science and the things that, because I think at the end of the day, you're making a distinction, oh, we can't explain what spirituality is, it's something much more than that. But is it possible that it's because we don't have the answers yet and because we haven't found the scientific knowledge to explain those things? And at the same time, if you can't explain those things, is it rational to give a name to it?
What I would say is that we do have the answers. If we look at neurology, and Sam Harris is a perfect example of demonstrating this, is that we do have the technology to show the mechanisms of what is going on. We can say that these are the synapses and these are the neurotransmitters that are allowing love to manifest. What I'm talking about, sure, these are mechanisms that can completely describe scientifically how our emotions and experiences are arising in our consciousness or awareness. But as much as you can describe the mechanism of it, what I would be advocating is for one to come to appreciate the experience of it. Focus on the experience of it. No matter how well you can explain what's going on, it's the experience of love that really transcends, that brings about meaning and value and purpose into our lives. Does that make any sense?
It does, but I don't think that because you can't explain it doesn't mean that there isn't an answer for it. And even if there was a complete pinpoint, answer for love or for beauty or for aesthetics, it doesn't mean that the experience is not special or that it's not enjoyable, it's not pleasurable. So I think that not having an answer to something and then just calling it spirituality is taking a little leap of faith, and I think that that's something that us atheists or agnostics don't like.
I think there's a category of confusion here, because when you say science versus spirituality, on the one hand, science is a set of methods for testing things, and on the other hand, you're talking about experiences. To say that you're experiencing spirituality and not science, that's not to say that you're not experiencing something which science can describe. That's just to say that you're not in a laboratory measuring something. That's not to say that what you're doing can't itself be explained by science.
But then you're giving science the thing is that I think everybody understands this. Science is so beyond us. With science, we're uncovering the world. You know, it's not like, oh, we're, you know, giving double-blind tests. It's not that. It's so much bigger than human understanding. We'll probably never understand the world because there's a barrier, and that's our skin. We will never know what the external world looks like without a perspective. And that's why we'll never know that much, or I don't think we ever will. So I think that's not what science, that's not the kind of science I'm talking about.
Just a quick comment on what you said. I think a lot of people get turned off by the word spirituality because of how religion has kind of hijacked it. I mean, you can call it anything you want. You can call it life. You can call it experiences. You can call it whatever word you want to use. The fact of the matter is that we're here. We're experiencing life. We're experiencing each other. We're experiencing laughter. We're experiencing ecstasy. And you can explain that scientifically, sure. But what about the experience of it? That's what you should, in my view, that's when you come to focus on that, you arrive at a very fulfilling place.
It's the appreciation and the experience of science.
Sure, you can put it that way. Let me go ahead and, I think that you can.
Right. This is kind of along the same line of questioning, but just the term spirituality itself, do you think, since it has spirit in it, it kind of implies that there's the existence of the spirit that's kind of outside the body, so like mind-body duality?
Right. Personally, when I talk about spirituality in this lecture, I'm not talking about some type of ethereal soul that's dwelling within the physical. I'm just simply talking about the experience of life, focusing on the awe of what we're experiencing.
Like when you say the word of the law versus the spirit of the law, you're not talking about some sort of immaterial ghost. You're just talking about the intentions.
Exactly.
Even if they are fully explicable in natural terms.
Exactly. Let me go back
I
to
wonder if there might be somewhat a misperception of scientists involved, because I think, in my experience, I don't know a whole lot of scientists, but I wouldn't say that scientists are going around saying, well, I think that's approximately like 10 milligrams of love. I just felt like I mean, I think that they do experience that, and I don't know any scientist who says that love doesn't matter because it's chemical. So I wonder if that might be a misperception that our society has of scientists being cold and overly logical or Spock.
Yeah, I think the neurotransmitter for love is called oxytocin. So we're experiencing oxytocin. Go ahead.
Sort of to piggyback on her comment, scientists, and I want to get to the word spirituality in a little bit, but scientists, the whole point of the it's like she was saying, there's no separation from scientists from experiencing things, from wanting things, from needing to know answers. We are, and I'm speaking as a scientist, we are encouraged and pushed and driven by the need to answer these things, by this unknown, this awe for the beauty of what we don't know. That is what makes science. That's what invented science, was this need to answer the questions that we have. And I agree with your definitions of spirituality, and they're very rational. They make a lot of sense. My problem that I'm having right now is maybe you could have chosen a better word than spirituality. Because spirituality it's a loaded word. It has a lot of connotations that say, hey, there's something weird going on and we're never going to get it and we're never going to understand. And there are a lot of things that we're not going to understand, but it's sort of, to me, spirituality is just saying we can't adequately explain what we're experiencing. And that's all spirituality says, but it also has a lot of loaded things on top of it. Faith-based things that we're just giving up towards higher powers or higher beings, or maybe, or just we're just letting it be something that's outside of the explainable world. And
as skeptics, as agnostics or atheists, we want to stay away from the superstitious, dogmatic beliefs that we can't prove. That's what we want. And as scientists, I think it's important to pursue that knowledge. My only thing is that the pursuit of science and philosophy should supplement the experience of life, not distract us from it. And I think that's what a lot of times people do. They become obsessed with the mechanisms. They become obsessed with the concepts that they forget about the real thing.
I think maybe it's not
Yeah.
a word.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'm gonna go. Okay. Mindfulness. You can use words synonymously with spirituality, and I do understand that it can be misleading. But I mean, for example, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, a lot of the philosophers of today, they're asked about spirituality. Okay, you have these objections against religion, what about spirituality? And so I think within a skeptical discussion, the word spirituality is often brought up, and so that's why I chose to use it. But I do understand the concern. I'm going to come over here first.
So I've had the privilege of working in a support role for scientists for the past 7 years. And prior to that, I've been doing support for other businesses. And the proportion of atheists, agnostics, and non-religious that I've met working with scientists is astronomical compared to what I've seen in the corporate world. And I have to say that I've seen more drama and more emotion in the scientific community than I've ever seen in the corporate world. As I do IT security, and some of the requests I've had to deal with love triangles and love conflicts. Talking about these people, and I work with bench scientists that are in there with pipettes, and I work with guys that are running genetics models, and they're the nerdiest people you'll ever meet, and they will stop you and they will tell you exactly how your immune system works and how it deals with that, and be a psychologist, and they tell you how your brain works and how you're responding to the stimulus. But I've never seen any one of those scientists not be able to exhibit emotion, not be able to appreciate what's occurring. So I don't think that was exactly fair. I think that was kind of compartmentalizing. I think we all are guilty of that, of saying, like, okay, this is what scientists do, and they're very cold and hard, and they come at me with these facts, and they don't, when they go home, they do the same thing to their spouses, and that's not the case. They're the same as you and I. They have the same emotions, and sometimes they're even worse at containing them than we are. I've been called more four-letter words than I care to bring up here. The second thing is I have a friend who was very scientific and became very religious, and he was talking to me, and I was open about being an atheist and not believing. And to me, that just means there's not enough evidence to prove the existence of God. It's not that you think there's a God, you're an idiot. It's that it's simply there's not enough evidence. Therefore, remove that from the plate. Not there is no God, and I'm going to sit here. So that I guess the definition of atheism is a little bit of a question. So my religious friend asked me, he's like, how can you, he's like, I just can't explain to you, after I became religious, after I became born again, I went outside and I saw the sunrise, and it made sense to me. I'm like, are you kidding? Because every time I go outside and see the sunrise, knowing how the solar system works, knowing where the sun is, what it is, that the rest of the stars are the same thing, or clusters of galaxies, or clusters of stars, or anything, that is amazing transcendentalism. You're like, wow, I can look up there and see that little point in the sky and know that is something so much bigger than me. So, and also the comments about spirituality, I appreciate the fact that you're bringing the word spirituality into this, because to this community, you're going to have a lot of objections to that word, but that word is also going to rope in people who wouldn't otherwise come to this conference. And they're going to say, what is spirituality? And they're going to look at a presentation like this and say, okay, so I can have this concept of this greater experience with the world around me without having to go through all of the angels and demons and all of that stuff. So it actually does add value, and because language is the way that it is and it evolves, I just wanted to thank you for using that word and putting it in that frame of reference, because I think it will open the door to more dialogue outside of this activity.
Thank you very much. Just a quick, just a quick comment on that. You're working in the field of mental health for the past 4 years. I've seen certain clinicians who look at an individual and they see the diagnosis. They see a bipolar person, they see a schizophrenic person, they see a person suffering from, any range of disorders, and they see them as that, rather than a unique individual who's gone through unique experiences and has molded and become who they are.
Same thing happens with religious people. You can't see an atheist.
Exactly.
As a person.
Exactly. 5 minutes? Okay. Back there.
On the focus on the experience comment, I feel like by focusing on the mechanisms that causes, like say, laughter, it helps us understand that the way I experience my laughter, even though you may laugh at other things, then yes, it's the same mechanism. So in essence, even though it feels like we are experiencing laughter differently, in reality it really is. It's really the same thing going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I think the mechanism is what it is. The way the human mind, the human brain works, and the way human body works is great. And it's enlightening to know this information and to have the research that backs up, how everything is going on the way that it is. I think it's vital. I think that it's important. I think it should be pursued. But don't let that distract you from experiencing laughter and enjoying it, and that being a moment where all questioning stops, where that being a moment where I don't need to think about how all of this is going on. It's just a beautiful experience. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to clarify a definition that I heard is having an experience is what you would tie to having spirituality or appreciating the experience. So then I would ask, would you consider like a cat or a dog or a bird to have spirituality when they experience their experiences?
Well, I think it's subjective, right? Each one of us have subjective experiences that are meaningful and valuable to us. I'm sure dogs and cats have those types of experiences. We've seen it. I think we've studied it to an extent that dogs experience various types of emotions and
so would you categorize dogs as having spirituality?
Sure. I mean, I can't perceive it because it's not a subjective experience, but from the objective evidence that we have, I would assume so. Go ahead.
I was just going to say quickly that I know I read one study recently where they found that when teachers were informed of a child's diagnosis before the school year, they actually treated them better and worked better with them, because having that knowledge of the science behind what was going on and knowing the sort of constellation of symptoms can actually help them understand the person better. So I think it's something you definitely don't want to make someone just a diagnosis, but I think when you meet in that middle ground of having them as a person and understanding the problem, it can actually make things more smoother.
Oh, absolutely. Let me clarify that. I would never minimize the scientific research that we have. I wouldn't minimize it. I wouldn't reduce it and say that it's inferior to spirituality or anything else. I think it's absolutely vital to our knowledge and our understanding of reality and existence. But as much as we have a bipolar person, as much as we have those diagnoses, we should treat each and every individual uniquely according to who they are and what they're experiencing. And when we do that, we can, I think, provide a holistic approach.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of controversy over the word spirituality because of its connotations. It's a bit vague. And I mean, I'm a non-believer. I don't have an issue with the word. I think there's a range of emotions we experience that I have yet to find a word in the dictionary to better describe it than spirituality. And like you mentioned, it's sort of been hijacked by spiritual community, but I mean, if you guys can find a better word to use than some of these range of emotion. And like, for example, Richard Dawkins, who's a militant atheist, he has an issue with the word. He actually describes himself as a spiritual person. And he talks about moments when he has that feeling. And one other thing, like neurophysicists and stuff talk about, like guys like Sanders and stuff, they're always big about talking about, we are all neurons, and that's basically what we are. And we can explain the mechanisms and the chemicals, but that doesn't, and a lot of people feel that takes away from the beauty or the experience of it, and they're always big about it. It doesn't take away from it. We can explain it, but that sensation, and I think spirituality is, you can think of a better word, let me know.
I've heard the essence of human, the essence of life, the essence of experiencing life. I mean, you can term it in different ways. I mean, I don't think that it takes away from, what's going on, the mechanisms. I think it supplements the experience of life, right? So, and it supplements it greatly. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that when it comes to people who focus on science, I think that it's the wonder and the awe-inspiring nature of science and the thrill of making a scientific discovery in relation to the world, that is what drives scientists. And I think that is very much connected to the spirituality in the sense that we talk about, like the thrill of and the wonder and overall. And also when you talk about like psychologists looking at a patient and just seeing a patient with a diagnosis, I think you can probably accuse a lot of doctors of the same thing, you know, like seeing this is a patient with cancer, not a patient who is going through a battle that's changing his life.
I completely agree with that. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, anybody else? No more questions? There's one back there. Go ahead.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for putting getting into the topic, because I think many people get off our religion and consider themselves spiritual rather than scientific, because they see science as something very mechanical or cold. But I would argue that if we go to semantics of what we would like the word to be, I think it has some value to say that the word in order to define part of the community of humanists. But I would pose that existentialism would probably be a better word. You were saying about the coldness of philosophers. Well, Jean-Paul Sartre or Friedrich Nietzsche, they would talk about taking in the experiences about this having this heroic meaning in life and making your life the best it can be, and being in the moment, experiencing nature. There's all themes within the existentialist philosophy that are not spiritual per se. They're very scientific, they're very rational, and they try to combine that. And I think that sense of fulfillment that you talk in spirituality can also be found on existentialism. So we would probably try to get that word instead of describing the community as spiritual and assuming that, because it does have the word spirit on it. So in order not to make any confusion when we're trying to communicate, that might be an alternative.
Yeah. And I think the gentleman over there made a good comment earlier about, when we talk about, I forgot what analogy he gave you, when we talk about the spirit of what? Spirit of the law or something like that. And it's a tricky word, and a lot of religious people have been using it, and they've kind of hijacked it, and maybe we can come up with a better word. If you guys know of any, I would definitely like to know. All right. Thank you, guys.